Hello and welcome to the first week's lecture for IS 335 from data to action. So this week we're going to go over just some high-level concepts and ideas, why this is important, a couple different terms in terms of how we think about data, and kind of how we apply, how does AI fit in the whole picture. Let's dive in. So I love this quote: "Without big data, you're blind and deaf in the middle of the freeway." It almost sounds kind of like a bad TikTok video, but it's very true because you don't know whether or not to go forward, you don't know whether or not to go backwards. You have really no visibility into what's working and what's not working. You're just taking hindsight, you're taking guesses, you're just hoping that you're making the right decision, and sometimes you are, sometimes you're not. So a little bit about me. You have links to learn more about me in the page, but basically I graduated from UNLV with my undergraduate, master's, and PhD. I worked at United Healthcare for 9 years, and then before that, Nevada Institute of Personalized Medicine. I've done primarily big data and data analytics for 10, 15 years. So learn all more about me. I encourage you to both follow me and also post things that you learn in this class on LinkedIn, because that will only help you. It shows the recruiters, to the world out there, that you're doing things that are applicable to everyday needs, and it does help you get a job. So for me, like I said, I love data science. I love solving problems. You know, the methods, things like that. I don't think that's necessarily the funnest part, but for me, when there's questions or unanswered things, that's what I love to dive into. I love to know why. So this was an article I was talking about, and this author, or this writer, talks about what the college of the future looks like. College enrollment is going to go down. The value of the college degree might change. So what does college look like? How does it help students in the next 5 years, next 10 years? Why is having a degree important? And so this is what the journalist Jeff kind of deals with. And one interesting thing that he published that I just absolutely love. So if we take a major, which is on the very right-hand side, and add data, how does it impact it? So if I'm an art history major and I take a couple of data classes, how does that impact my earning ability? So if you see right here on number 4, if you have a history major, my grandfather was a history major, but you add data analytics, you get a 36% salary increase or wage premium. That's still a lot of money. You're making $100,000, now you're making $136,000. Think about that. I mean, after the first year, you're making another $30,000. That pays for rent. It's a lot of money. So you have a history major. There's a lot of history majors out in the world, and you add data analytics to it, you get 36% more salary. Or your wage premium goes up 36%. You need to be a little bit more specific. Well, what we do is business, marketing, management, and related support services. Data analytics, again, this is not necessarily a degree. This is just taking a couple classes. You get 33% more wage premium. Because all those things, business, marketing, management, they can be done without data and they can be done with data. That means people are graduating with no data experience and people are graduating with data experience. And those that graduate with data experiments demand higher salaries and get it. And that's why I want you to post on LinkedIn. That's why I want you to be active. I want to see you successful. And this class is just one way to do that. Now, big picture, because I'm going to break it down to one more level, but just big picture from your book: descriptive data, predictive, and prescriptive. Now, the easiest way to think about this is descriptive is the past, kind of what happened in the past. Predictive is what's going to happen in the future. Prescriptive is if we change X and Y, can we make it happen again? Okay, so descriptive, hey, I know the history of the stock is X, Y, and Z. For the last 3 years, the stock made X amount of money. Predictive says, hey, every time, I don't know, there's a crisis, this stock does that. Okay, it's predictive. You predict it. Now, prescriptive is more intelligent. Prescriptive says, hey, if I buy these other 2 stocks and they go up, then I know this one's going to go down. Or vice versa. You're trying to change or optimize something. And we'll get into this a little bit more. And this class is basically written around that idea. Now, we're not going to cover all these chapters, but you see how each one of these chapters deals with this concept of historical data, descriptive, predictive data, what's happening next week. If we really don't change anything, what happens next? Then prescriptive, if we optimize, if we change, if we add A and B, how can we get C to be better? Yeah. And these are just more formal definitions from the actual book. Descriptive analytics, summarizing historical data to understand past performance and trends. Predictive, using statistical models, and forecasting to estimate future outcomes. Prescriptive, optimizing and stimulations to identify the best course. Now, when we think about business and business methods, it's kind of hard because sometimes, when you do this, it's just so natural after a while. So we have to make a decision. And to make a decision, you have to define the scope of it. You have to be very didactic, very clear. You have to write down, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to buy cars from location A and sell them in location B. I want to go on Yelp, mine companies that have bad reviews, and offer them a service to fix their bad reviews. So you have to define the decision. Now, a traditional approach is to say, hey, you know what? I know because my cousin did it, my friend did it, and I'm just looking at these numbers, it works. It may not be the best, but it works. But analytics now says we can't replace that it works. We can't replace that type of instinct, but we can augment it. We can optimize it. And we use that, we use analytics and data to do that. So it's not one or the other. It's not 100% data-driven decision. It's not 100% human-driven decision. It's a synergy of both of them. Now, business intelligence, because there's a program called Power BI, but business intelligence is a framework, a way of thinking to solve problems. So there's another model I want to talk about down here a little bit later, but we ask an interesting question. We get the data, and this is how you do your analyze me. Explore the data, model the data. Model the data just means we do something with it. We can summarize it, we can kind of predict it, we do something, and then communicate and visualize the results. So this right here, this whole little flowchart cloud button thing, this is your Analyze Me 1 and 2. This is what business does. This is what we do in the world to figure out how to make more money, how to save money, how to optimize processes. If I change the price at the restaurant at UNLV, so a burrito is $5. If I change it to $8, I'll make more money. Okay, so I own a burrito shop at the student union, and I'm going to change the price from $5 to $8. Well, then I have to get the price of how many burritos I sold at $5, how many burritos I sold at $8. I have to explore the data. Then I have to model it, and I say, yeah, you know what? $8 might have been a bit too much. The optimal price from all these statistics is $6.62. And then I report it out to, I don't know, whoever my boss is. And you do this again and again for all different types of questions. And we optimize everything. And the reason we do that is we optimize either for maximum profit or for loss, in order to minimize loss. There's another way to visualize it. We have raw data. Events or cash register receipts or miles traveled or miles per gallon, whatever raw data we have, context, how that data fits into our question. Then we analyze that raw data and that context, and then make a decision. And then we see if that were correct. Because what worked 10 years ago might not work now. Another way of reporting it, reporting, analysis, monitoring, and prediction. So why do we use business intelligence? I mean, it doesn't seem that easy. It doesn't seem that hard. We have to gather data instead of just making a snap decision. We have to kind of model it. We have to predict it. It can be a lot of work. So we use it for operational efficiency. We need to know, what works, what doesn't work. One of the things I was working on was a call when a person calls a company. I had to call Travelers Insurance to pay my bill today because their website wasn't working. So when I call that company, I'm sure Travelers estimates that call about $25. I called them this morning. I haven't received a call back. I'm going to call them again. That's another $25. So they start looking at it. So how can we save $50 and how can we make, Dr. Young happy by not having to call twice? Well, our website was down. Why is our web, you start optimizing it. So it increases operational efficiency. And, one way to do that is have a dashboard that says, hey, out of the whole year, we noticed that calls spiked this time, and that's when our website went down. Or maybe calls spiked during the beginning of the year or during payday or whatever. It also gives you an edge over your competitors. I was on a call today about a product with a coworker of mine, and me and him used that product for, 2 years, and in the last 2 months, it just sucked. It just absolutely sucked. And he had the same, I was asking him if he was having problems too. And he's like, yeah, it just started sucking too, about a month ago for him. So I'm going to cancel my service. He's going to cancel it. He already canceled the service. I'm going to go to another vendor. And I'm sure that if that company had intelligence and started looking at what's going on, they would see the trend. But maybe they do, maybe they don't. So now let's go into the levels. And again, I told you I was going to add one more because this is, when I've taught in the past, I kind of like this model a little bit better. Again, we have the descriptive, which, tells us about the past. So for me in this class, for example, I did a descriptive analysis. I looked at all the rate my professors, all the, the surveys you fill out at the end of the year, all the grades, all the time, all the clicks, everything. So I got all that data and I got descriptive analysis. Then I did diagnostic analysis on that. And I said, hey, so I noticed that A students spend 3 hours more a week in the class than C students. So I got some diagnostic. I don't know really why or what they were doing, but I could see some differences. I could see some diagnostic differences. I kind of put it in big buckets. And then I just started doing predictive analysis. Well, how do I get the C students up to A? I know that it's a 3-hour difference. I know that it's because I have a lot of lessons, sometimes a lot of chapters. So maybe if I shave a few chapters off, it will help. It will work. So that's the last kind of 2 steps. So this semester I took off, I think, chapters 12, 13, 7 because of this pipeline. I grabbed all the data. I made some diagnostic judgments, some statistical diagnostic judgments. I made some predictive analysis, semester over semester. And then this semester I made some prescriptive changes to see if we can have, more A's, better students, more learning, Here's the official definitions. I'm not going to read them. They're in your PowerPoint. If you really like reading them, you can. I think it's more important to have a conversation with you and help you explain it as a human than to read a definition. Now, with the 5B, so this is how we describe data. If I ask you, how do you describe a car? Or how do you describe a vehicle? What's a car or truck? 4 tires, maybe it's a motorcycle got 2 tires. Maybe it's lifted, maybe it's lowered. 4-door, 2 doors. So you have vocabulary to describe a car. Well, what about describing data? How fast is it coming in? You're getting updates every 10 seconds. So with your phone, your phone queries cell towers hundreds of times a second. With YouTube, well, that might be the best example. With other things, my web campus. I want to get an update on web campus. MindTap only pushes to web campus, I think, every hour. So I'm not getting a lot of data. Okay, how is the data varied? So am I just getting all Excel type data? Ones, zeros, like tabular data, or am I getting pictures and video? How good is the data? Is it is it not accurate? Is it all over the place? Is it clean data? Is it highly repeatable? Does it have some variance? So these are some of the things we have to think about when we describe data, because it matters a lot. If we have something that is a huge data set, a very, very huge data set, very, very large, okay? Every movie that's ever made, whatever, in MP4 format, it's a huge thing. But there's not like 50 movies being released every day. Or say Hollywood blockbusters. A lot of volume, but not a lot of velocity, and not a lot of adding to it. You design everything one way for that. Where on the opposite end, if you're using your Apple Watch and you're trying to track your heart rate, that might sample 10 times a minute. You're looking at your TV or something that tracks, what you're watching. Maybe it's 1,000 times a second. So you think about how the incoming data, all this kind of plays together. So now, we do that because we have to understand the data. And once we do, then we can start adding AI. We can start adding tools versus intent. Okay. So this part's not necessarily in your book, but how does AI help you get to goal? How do you measure efficiency gains? Because you can fight with AI for weeks and not make any progress. Microsoft had a survey out last year where something like the question you ask it and the answer you get back is not the same thing, like 47% of the time, 46% of the time. So how would you like it if if me and you are in a relationship and I say, hey, can you go to the store and get a gallon of milk? And you come back and you have, I don't know, a blockbuster video or, a new cat. I'm like, dude, I asked you to go to the store and get milk. You came back with a kitten. And that happens 46% of the time. So how do we know the tools versus intent? How do we know that we're getting at true efficiency gains? We look at, the results. We look at processes. We look at the volume of data we can process, the variety of data, things like this. This is pretty much more of the same. Contextual benchmarking is the idea that if I look at a number, when a great example is readmission rate. So you get out of the hospital, and what rate do people go back in the hospital? It's a very vitally important number because let's say every time you go to the hospital, you get $20,000 bill. So I leave the hospital, I go back to the hospital, that's $20,000. Now, if I go back to the hospital really soon, the hospital pays for it. If it's after a certain amount of time, the insurer pays for it. Well, okay. The problem is readmission rate can mean 20 different things to 20 different people. So you have to have context around what readmission rate are you talking about. So standalone numbers lack meaning. You have to understand semantic meaning, contextual meaning. That's probably the most important one on here. Come on. So, going on top of the descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive understanding of data, we have to be able to, kind of classify that. That's a classification system. When we talk about framework, that's what we're doing. Hey, we're dealing only with descriptive data. We're only dealing with past stocks. I don't care about necessarily the future stocks. I just want the past stocks, or I only want to predict future stocks. And that framing, that framework, impacts your decision. That impacts how you move forward. And to that point, we get to this pyramid where everything in your life, and I literally mean everything in your life, should be based on this, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong. We have data, and as humans, we absorb data through our brain, through our eyes, through our ears. We take all this data in, and then we kind of convert to information. We convert that information to knowledge, and then we convert to wisdom. Now, if we notice, the reason I like the other four methods, the descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive, sorry, I had to think about that, is it matches these, at least in my mind. The descriptive, that's just your data. How many times did I run out of gas going to school? 7. I haven't, but 7. Now, diagnostically, why did I run out of gas? Because I didn't put gas in my tank. So I know that if I go 2 weeks without getting gas in my car, I'm going to run out of gas. So my wisdom now, my predictive is, hey, I'll get gas every Friday. And I know that's super simple, but just scale that up, and you'd be surprised about how often that businesses don't follow this. They get the data, they get some basic information, and they cut it off there. You get some data, they get some information, and then they stop right there. I was just reading an article about taxes, and it's a $25 tax. And so basically everyone said had to pay like a $25 tax. And so, they spent $25 million to mail letters for a $25 tax. Basically, they're losing money. They're spending so much money mailing the tax. They got the data, they got the information, and they're not going to do anything about it. And we see this throughout society. We see it throughout business. We have data, we have information, we kind of understand the problem, but we never move it forward. This is called the DIKW. It's, I forgot, Pengarski and somebody else that basically wrote it. But please just, there might be a quiz on this. Don't worry about the quizzes and tests. I don't want you to worry about them. Just whenever you see a problem, whenever you stand in line, whenever you're frustrated, whenever it's Smith's and what is going on here, whenever you're at UNLV and the register's line, it's like a mile long, or whenever there's a problem, you're at the DMV, think about this. Because this could have solved that problem. The DMV knows when they're going to be busy, and they know these days, they know how many employees they have. So it just never gets converted out to knowledge and wisdom. They never hire the correct amount of people. They never build the correct size of building. They never convert to wisdom. I worked on a project, real quick before we go, I worked on a project. We looked at online clinics. So you have a cold, I need a doctor's note, and you do an online call versus at a brick and mortar clinic. You actually drive your butt to a doctor's office and go in there. Because in the past, executives treated them the same in terms of staffing. We're going to staff them the same. But that's a stupid idea. Because if I don't feel good or I want to ditch work, it's a lot easier for me to pick up my phone and call like a FaceTime visit with a doctor, whatever it is, like a Now Clinic or telehealth doctor. Hey, I don't feel good. I don't want to go to work. Okay, let me write you a note. And that's a lot shorter, a lot quicker visit than having to go down to an in-person in-clinic. In the past, they had the data and they had the information. They just never converted it out to knowledge. Part of my job was to take it those extra 2 levels. What is the difference between an online clinic and an in-person clinic? What's the staffing difference? What's the dynamics on holidays, on sporting events, things like this? So I'll leave you with this. The goal is to turn data into information. And then turn information into insight. Because with insight, we can make life easier, we can make life better, we can make the world a better place to be. If you have questions, let me know. Don't forget to do the introduction post. Make sure it's done by Wednesday and then follow up by Thursday. The Mind Tap work. There's not a lot of this week, but just get in the process of going through Mind Tap. You can do this week. Next week's open. Week 3 is open. I'm trying to catch up on videos. I had horrible problems with videos, so hopefully this one works better. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, have a great week.